everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Just a heads up, we are recording. So while we would love to see your faces, especially later during the conversation component, I understand if that's not the best way for you to be here today. So just make that call for yourself. I just wanted to also let you know that the captions are available if you prefer to have captioning. It's that live transcript CC button at the bottom of your screen. Thank you for being here. My name is Emily Ryan. I'm the director of the Commons at KU, which is a space where we work to bring people together across interests and expertise and disciplines and experience to inform broader conversations. And today I am really excited to welcome you to this event, which is actually the 10th one in the Educate and Act series, which the Commons co-hosts with the Emily Taylor Center for Women and Gender Equity and the Center for Service Learning. Both at KU. So I want to make a point to recognize my collaborators in those two spaces for helping: Kate Kemper, who's here, and Jamela Watson-Thompson at the Center for Service Learning, and then Meg Williams at the Emily Taylor Center, who's also here, for Women and Gender Equity. In order to situate us both in a common physical space, virtual space, I suppose, and a mindset to receive today's conversation, I want to acknowledge where we are. In present-day Lawrence, Kansas, we are residing on land that is nourished by both the Kansas River, which flows through to our north, and the Wakarusa River to our south. This place is home to human and more than human species, including plants like echinacea, silphium, and milkweed, and animals like red-tailed hawks and king snakes and bison. It's characterized by wetlands, rolling hills, and also prairie. It is the traditional homelands of many peoples from whom the federal government took the land in 1825. And as we know today in the state of Kansas, this land is still home to many First Nations people, including the many students, staff, and faculty at both the University of Kansas and Haskell Indian Nations University, whose collective wisdom expands our learning potential beyond curricular goals, and who individually possess their own ways of knowing and relating to this land. With that acknowledgement, I am very grateful to, in the capacity that I can, welcome you to today's session, which is an opportunity for us to act in accord with what we know about this place and our responsibility to it. As a little bit of background on this series, we created this we thought it up, I suppose, in the fall of 2019, thinking ahead to 2020 and the numerous opportunities there would be to get involved through the census and elections and addressing barriers to participation in democratic processes. And then it became clear that we could spotlight regular engagement opportunities to really highlight the importance of active community engagement at all times, not just in an election year. Though we find ourselves in one again. So we continue to offer these events as a way to articulate how research and classroom learning can translate to civic engagement and to understanding policy, and ultimately to connect you with tools so that you can identify your own agency as a citizen and a community member. It is a series that targets issues of inequity and one that connects information with resources for action, how and where you can get involved. So with that, one last announcement, I think, which is that this session, as I mentioned, was being recorded, will later be posted on the Emily Taylor Center's YouTube channel and available for viewing if you have friends who wanted to be here and just, are attending one of the 3 other things happening right now, or just couldn't make it. After the presenters have all spoken, we'll open it up to discussion. Please, at that point, feel free to use the chat to just indicate or raise your hand if you're interested to let us know that you have a question, and then we'll just call on you so that we can open up. So I think I'll introduce all 4 speakers right now and then just ask you to present sort of in order. We'll start with Joel Campbell, who is a mechanical engineering student at KU and also a member of the Sunrise Movement. Claire Dopp, who is a chemistry student at KU, and speaking to us about the work that she and her colleagues in the Blakemore lab are doing. Then Jamie Hofling, who is a food waste reduction specialist at the Douglas County Office of Sustainability, will share. And finally, John Head, who is a professor of law at KU, will share about the work that interests him and also what he's working on with regard to policy especially. So thank you all for being here. Joel, feel free to take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joel. I have been a member of the Sunrise Movement for about 1.5 years now. I joined in fall of 2020. I just kind of want to talk a little bit about why you should get involved and maybe kind of address some common misconceptions about getting involved. So I think we all sort of understand that getting involved is important, making your voice heard and making the change that you want to see in the world. But sometimes it's just hard to take that first step. So I definitely wanted to talk about some things that maybe prevent people from getting involved. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is the idea that you have to know everything about the subject to get involved. I definitely didn't when I joined. And for a while, I felt like, I didn't know enough and I wasn't knowledgeable enough. But it really doesn't matter a whole lot because it's a process of learning as you get involved. You talk about it with the people around you, the people who are invested in this stuff. You do events, you do research on different topics that you're looking at. And you learn as you go along, which is exactly what I've done. Basically everything that I know has come from the past year and a half and doing research on things like that. So if that's something that you're interested in and you feel like you don't know enough, I would advise you to just not worry about it and get involved. The fact that you're here listening to this, paying attention, means that you already care more than, I would say, a number of our legislators, especially the ones in the Kansas legislature. So if you're afraid that you don't know enough to make, to do action and things like that, I would say you know more than maybe the people who are actually making the laws. So don't worry about it and get involved however you can. Another thing I see a lot is that people are concerned that their contributions won't actually have an effect on things. And this is something that I know from personal experience isn't true because Sunrise has influenced a lot of policy in the Lawrence area specifically. We encouraged them to adopt the 5 principles of the Green New Deal last year, which was kind of a big step in getting sustainability, higher on the list of priorities for them. We've talked with the Sustainability Advisory Board and made different, we've talked with them about different policies that they're encouraging the City Commission to adopt, and we've given them guidance on that sort of thing and what we want. And we're continuing to just, talk with local government about all sorts of things like that and making, change wherever we can. And there are other organizations that are doing a lot of work like this, such as the Climate Voter Project, which is something that I'm fascinated in because they've mobilized millions of voters who would normally have not voted all across the nation since, the past 5 years, which is kind of amazing to me that they're doing that sort of work. And then another more local organization is Justice Matters, which is an interfaith organization that focuses on a number of different things. And last year they got the mayor of Lawrence and a member of the Douglas County Commission to pledge to end homelessness by 2023, which is really incredible and absolutely necessary if we're going to move forward with sustainability efforts. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Not a lot of people go to public comment for city commission, and not a lot of people contact their lawmakers. And so the voices that are present are especially loud. So if you are interested in this at all and are thinking about getting involved, understand that your voice will be heard and it will be significant. And you don't have to know everything. You just have to understand that, the climate is changing and we have to do something about it. Something else I wanted to discuss was just like the idea of how much to get involved. And there is an article, actually, if I may, I'm going to link an article that I wrote a few months ago that got published in the Daily Kansan. And I talk a little bit more about this there, but basically, whatever you can give will be more than what would have happened if you didn't give time. And since climate change is such an ever-present issue, everything that we can get is important. So even if that's like an hour a week, an hour every 2 weeks, going to an event every now and then, like that's significant and important. And it's really important that if again, I keep saying this, but if this is something you're interested in, however much time you are able to dedicate is wonderful. And we would love to have you. And Sunrise especially, we have a principle that emphasizes taking breaks when you need to and understanding that climate change work is a lot of work and it can be really heavy sometimes. And we would much rather people take, a 2-week or 1-month break than, burn out and not come back to the movement, because that's very important to us. And mental health should be central in our movement forward towards sustainability. And I guess one last thing I wanted to talk about and kind of leave us off on a good note is there's a lot of really wonderful community in organizing. Basically, you get to hang out with people who are concerned about the same things that you are. And I've made some of my best friends through the Sunrise movement. And we will do things like have nature time, like take hikes. And recently we had a picnic on the Lawrence Public Library lawn, and it was very windy, but it was a very good time. And organizing behind something that you believe in is just an incredibly powerful bonding experience. And if it's something that you care about, again, you will find some of your best friends through there. And especially if you feel like you're helpless and you feel like the system is against you, the best way to change that is to go to the organizations who are trying to make a difference and talking to the people who are also passionate about this. And making a change with those people and joining that community will be, honestly, it's been one of the best things that I've done. And if it's something you're interested in, that might be true for you too. So I also real quick wanted to drop a link to Sunrise's Linktree if you want to talk to us a little bit more or get involved. We have a couple events coming up, and we're getting involved in some things with renewable energy and sustainability with Evergy and things like that. So that's pretty much all I've got. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Joel. Wonderful. Yeah, Kate, the comment in the chat there about care, I'll bring that up later, I think, too, because I think it will connect across some of these other talks as well. Claire, would you like to share?
Of course. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Great, awesome. So hi everybody, like Emily said, my name is Claire Dopp. I am a chemistry student here at the University of Kansas. I'm a member of the Blakemore group, and I'm very, very excited to be able to talk to you today about chemistry and its ties to global climate policy, where my research is going and where it has taken me just kind of around the world. So like I said, I'm a member of the Blakemore lab. I hope you can see this and it's not covering up. Okay, cool. We'll just do that. I joined the Blakemore lab as an emerging scholar in 2019 as a freshman. I was really tied to the lab. It was the only one in this list of descriptions that talked about environmentally beneficial chemistry through a wide array of projects. And over the past few years, I've had my own project developing these Heterobi-Metallic complexes seen here on the bottom right. This is basically just constructing complexes that contain two metals, interchanging the secondary one for different Lewis acids to be able to see and map these trends that exist on my metal of interest or metal or ion of interest. And so I build these complexes containing vanadiol, and I'm able to see how changing the Lewis acid of the secondary metal changes the structural and electrochemical properties of that vanadiol ion. And I'm really interested in this because vanadiol is a great model for uranyl, which is a component of spent nuclear fuel. And so by learning more about these systems and about how these properties change, we're able to learn ways to better repurpose spent nuclear fuel. That's just a little bit about what the Blakemore lab does. We also do stuff with hydrogen evolution, CO2 reduction, and there's a lot more things in the works coming up. So I'm very excited, and I'm very fortunate to be a member of the lab. This research has taken me to a lot of really cool places, but the coolest by far has to be COP26. If you're unfamiliar, this is the United Nations Convention on Climate Change that occurred in Glasgow, Scotland last November. I had the great privilege of going with the American Chemical Society as an NGO observer. And this, I really expected the UN meeting to be like they show in movies and on TVs, just like hundreds of delegates, everybody speaking one at a time. It's only negotiations, but it really was a conference, like an academic conference. It's communities, countries, corporations getting together to share ideas, to share what they've been doing, what they're going to be doing, pledging, making goals, all that, and doing it together as a means to influence each other. So I had a really great time. I attended a lot of different events, such as diversity, equity, and inclusion panels, green zone industry booths. I met people at the US Senate. I saw Nancy Pelosi, Pete Buttigieg, admin of the EPA, Michael Regan, tons of people. So it was a really great experience. And I would have never expected that I would have done something or attended something on that global of a scale. And, when I got together with the 4 other members of my team, for a bit of context, there were 2 weeks of COP. 5 graduate students went week 1, and then 5 undergrads went week 2. So I was in the undergrad group. The 4 other undergrads that I went with, we kind of talked together to kind of piece together what were our key takeaways from COP, what were the most important things that we would want to share with people. And the most prominent of these was that scientific advancement is here. We funnel millions and billions into scientific research, and we have the science and technology to implement new solutions to mitigate climate change. But there has to be a willingness on the policy side to do so. I didn't attend a lot of negotiations, but this guy to my right in the picture did. And he was telling me about how, larger, more developed, G7 countries such as the US and the UK would not really be in favor of using certain language or committing to a certain goal, but they would try to influence other countries such as, this year was India, to be the scapegoat and try to not try to stop the implementations of such goals. So this year in the Glasgow Climate Pact, we see the language of phasing out fossil fuels. But, India was a big proponent of using only the language phasing down, so as to not have so much of a negative connotation. So, to circle back, it's things like that. We have to have a willingness to implement certain policy. We have to want to make a change, or else it's not going to get done. The Blakemore Lab and tons of labs in academia around the country, tons of national labs. Tons of people around the world are making amazing scientific discoveries, but there has to be a willingness to implement them and to change away from the current norm. And I would say the biggest thing that I want everyone listening here to take away is that the climate crisis is everyone's fight. I offer a completely different perspective. I think today I don't come from policy at all. I've never been involved in campaigns or anything like that. I hope to be, but it's just not where I'm at right now. I come from science and I come from chemistry, and attending this global of an event really showed me that there is a place for everyone in this. Everyone can get involved in a way that they want to get involved. And just to, echo what Joel said, I think getting involved in a community-wide, local kind of basis and then moving your way up is definitely the way to go. I think I'm not going to, sit here and tell you about individual action. I think that, lobbying our governments, our corporations, all things like that is, the way to make the biggest change. So like I said, I think the climate crisis, everyone's fight, everyone has a role in this, no matter your major, who you are, you belong in the climate movement, and there will be no other movements if this kind of issue isn't solved. So, that's just where I want to leave it. I want to say a few thank yous, of course, to my PI, Dr. James Blakemore, listening in today. I hope Rithi Goldwanker, my PhD candidate mentor in the lab, and of course, Dr. Greg Foy and Dr. Keith Peterman for organizing my trip to COP26 through the American Chemical Society. We have a lot of funding for our labs, such as the DOE. I have to thank Center for Undergraduate Research, of course, for just getting me started in research in the first place, and of course the Commons for having me here today. So thank you guys very much for listening. If I can stop.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Claire. I think you actually also, in addition to delivering really interesting comments, set us up really nicely for Jamie when you spoke about getting involved locally. So Jamie Hofling, would you like to speak next?
Hi, am I sharing the proper screen? You guys able to see that? Okay. Great, all right. So thank you for having me today. Let me just get my screen situated here. Okay, so I work in the Douglas County Sustainability Office located in downtown Lawrence. And I was hired in February of 2021, so last year, to lead 2 food waste reduction programs. And these pictures are of me working on those 2 programs. So that's my title, is Food Waste Reduction Specialist. But because of my background working on climate-related issues for the state, my role pretty quickly expanded to include working on a climate action plan for Lawrence and Douglas County. So my focus today is going to be on that plan, on the climate action plan, where I'm going to talk about where we've been, where we're going with it, and if there are questions about the food waste reduction programs that I work on, totally happy to answer those questions as well, but this presentation won't focus on them. So what is a climate action plan anyway? It's a framework for measuring, planning, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions and their related climatic impacts. Local governments design them and utilize them as custom roadmaps for making policy decisions and for understanding how to achieve the largest, most cost-effective emissions reductions that are also in alignment with our goals of local government. Our planning process is a little different from the traditional models of planning. Normally a plan is written and then shared with the community, and we're actually choosing to lead with the community first and have the community voice shape what goes into that plan. And then at that point, we'll take it back and I'll ask for feedback as well. And then we also understand that the burden of climate change varies from different members of the community. So we're centering our work on those who are shouldering the biggest burden, which is largely people of color and members of the community who are low income. Everybody on this call, I'm sure, is very well aware that conditions are changing. And here in the Midwest, we're seeing more extreme weather, such as floods, heat waves, and drought. And that's just to name a few of them. So a local plan will look specifically at changes like those and the things that we're going to continue to see in the future, and then include strategies that will help us adapt to those changes. For example, one could be, does our community need a cooling center to help us cope with heat waves? So where are we in this plan? We've been at this for a little while. I've got some of the items here that started back in 2021, last year. We did start with a community survey, and also because we're trying to center this work around the more vulnerable members of the population, we also hired community coordinators through the Sunrise Project to help us collect concerns from very specific community members. And then the survey also collected data for us. So that was really kind of where we started. And then we created some public facing materials like a website. We have a story map up. And I'll share the link at the end of this presentation. It's got a wealth of information on it. And right now we're still receiving public input, and we're forming a steering committee to help us with this. That'll include other government departments that will be built into this plan. We're also kind of moving into the third bullet here, where we say analyze, collect the data, and ensure diversity of voices. We've actually hired a couple of interns from KU to help us dig into the research that we've picked up from the community surveys, and are starting to synthesize that data and put it together with the narratives that we got from the coordinators. But there's still time to get involved. This isn't the end of it. So here I want to talk a little bit about ways that you guys could get involved. I was really happy to hear Joel's presentation from the Sunrise Movement, because he gave so much of the advice that I would give when I was working on climate issues around the state and trying to help people get involved very actively in the climate movement. So this is one way that you can do that right here locally. You can actually become what we call a climate ambassador. And those are people who are concerned about climate change, concerned about the impacts on us locally. So not maybe so much about polar bears, although that's very important in the melting of icebergs, all of that's connected, right? But we were looking for ambassadors who want to speak to people here locally and within their existing circles of people. And we have a whole bunch of different activities that people can use as a guide. And we actually have a guidebook that has those activities listed out. But there's also other ways that you can do it too. So if you choose to do this and you sign up and you look through the ambassador guidebook and think, oh, I want to tweak this a little bit, you're definitely welcome to do that. But basically, some of the ideas are to do things like, whoops, I'll have to get to that in just a moment. Sorry, that's not my next slide. But I will get into some of the activities here in just a second. Basically, you're wanting to have a conversation with people that you already know in your community and really feel compelled to get involved in this climate action process and provide feedback to us that can be used and baked into the plan. So when you're thinking about being a climate ambassador, here's just a couple of ideas about that. Consider the effects. How is a changing climate affecting our daily life, from how we produce, eat, buy, and dispose of food, how we build and upkeep our homes. So consider these effects when you're thinking about hosting a climate conversation and providing office back to us that can be used in our plan. The plan will ultimately set policy direction for the city and the county. So we're in this office, the Office of Sustainability is working really hard on pulling all the pieces together. So the narratives that I mentioned from the overburdened members of our community, the results we're getting from that we've gotten from the community at large. We're continuing to do further outreach in the rural areas of Douglas County. And then also what we pull in from the climate ambassadors, the narratives and the photo voices or whatever we get from our ambassadors, we're going to put all that together, and that's going to ultimately be a guide that can set policy direction in the future to really create the kind of future that we want to have. And that will help inform ways of how we produce energy, how we build roads and bridges, how we leverage federal, state, and regional resources, how we absorb those extreme weather events that I mentioned earlier, how we prepare buildings and homes for extreme weather, and how we support businesses and entrepreneurs, and of course, how we reduce waste. There's a regional plan, the Climate Action KC plan, that I would highly recommend people look at if you're thinking about getting involved. This is a really good plan you could look at and kind of see what some of the policy recommendations are for the region. So as I mentioned a moment ago, one of the activities that you could get engaged in as a climate ambassador is to host a climate conversation. And we have a lot of different questions that could be presented as a way to start a conversation. And there's just a couple examples over there on the right side of the slide. When was the last time that weather disrupted your plans for work, school, events, or other plans? And then what happened? What's something that you'd like to see the city or the county work on? Those kinds of things are nice ways to kind of start a conversation about climate change without jumping right into the doom and gloom of it, because sometimes that's where conversations can go. It's really nice to try to have a real open conversation where there's a lot more curiosity about what we can do and what we'd like to see our future look like. So we've got some questions in the climate conversation starter package that's in the ambassador handbook or the guidebook. And like I said, that's not the only way to get involved. There's other ways too. We have a book club suggestion as well. And I'll hold these up. One of them that we're recommending for a book club is All We Can Save. This is an excellent book for those of you who haven't read it. And we do have copies here in the office that we can gift to you, actually, we don't need them back, to host a book club. So if you're somebody who on the call who wants to do a book club and wants copies of books for your club members, you can get this one, or Braiding Sweetgrass. This is the other one. We have copies of both of these, limited supply though. So if you sign up and contact me, I'd be happy to get you copies of these books. We've also got these little jars that have the logo on them, just to kind of keep the visuals out there of that. Douglas County and Lawrence are working on this plan, and we really do want to respond to a changing climate and make sure that our community is secure and strong into the future. So if you have questions about how to get involved and I didn't address them in this presentation, feel free to ask in the Q&A part. And then, like I said earlier, if you wanted to get into anything on the food waste reduction side of things, let me know. If we don't have time today, I can always fill you in on that later. So that's all I've got.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Jamie. Wow. I'm so excited about all the ways that we're already dovetailing. And then John Head, our final presenter today.
Well, can you hear me okay? Speaking of dovetailing, I'm pleased as well, as is Emily, to see some of the overlaps of topics that have been discussed. I came armed with a very low-tech handout, and I will show it to you here. Civic engagement is obviously the key point that we're emphasizing and focusing on food, climate, and developing policy. And while I'm thinking of it, I'll go ahead and show my email address there in case anybody wants to follow up with some questions. I'm happy to respond to those. I had 3 points that I wanted to emphasize, and fortunately, one of them has already been touched on to a certain extent already by Claire, actually. So global as well as local, international organizations, and rules and regulations. So the first point that I want to make is that although the actual implementation of reforms having to do with climate change, or in my case, I'm focused on agricultural reform as well, has to be local, there also has to be a lot of coordination. And in fact, Claire was talking about this in terms of her participation in the COP26 talks in Glasgow under the Blakemore Lab auspices. There are a lot of international problems, global problems, that in my view at least require global solutions. They require local solutions and local action and local work. but they also require coordination at the global level, or at least at the regional level. The second point then has to do with international organizations. One of the ways in which people can get civic engagement, it seems to me, in addition to the local level, is at the global level in terms of trying to influence international organizations of one sort or another. And I put a list here of IPCC and the FAO and IBRD. That's the International Panel on, or Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and Food and Agriculture Organization, and International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, or World Bank, International Fund for Agricultural Development, which is EFAD or IFAD, and various others. So there's just a hodgepodge of international entities. Some of them are government based, such as World Bank, and many of them are not. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of environmental international NGOs, some of them focusing on climate change, some on soil degradation, and various other topics. And it may well seem at first glance that, well, this is maybe beyond my scope, my reach to be trying to influence international organizations or being involved in them some way. But I think that it's not, because there can be, for undergraduate students, graduate students, and others who are further along in their careers, opportunities for internships, opportunities for jobs. And I'll talk in just a moment about some of the ways in which some of the jobs that I've had that I think are open to a lot of people. A second way, of course, that we can have influence at the international level is not through international organizations influencing international organizations, but instead having something to do with law. So the third of the 3 points is legal reform. And in that case, I think of it both in terms of treaties at the international level. I'll hold this up there for the magic it might hold. Treaties at the international level, but also national legislation. Someone already mentioned efforts to influence legislators at the state level or at the national level. There are so many opportunities that, as someone pointed out, I think Joel pointed out, relatively few people take advantage of in terms of contacting and influencing the development of policy and legislation. In terms of policy also, I think, let's see, I wrote this down. Claire made the point in one of those slides that she showed us that scientific advancement is here, but there must, I wrote it in shorthand, I'm having trouble reading it, but there must be a willingness to implement on the policy side. Well, how is it that you get policy in place? Usually it's through legal change. It's through legal reform of one sort or another, usually in the form of legislation at the national or local level, and in the form of treaties at the global level. And so it seems to me that that's an important element of the toolbox that you might think about using in order to have some civic engagement on these issues that matter to us all. There was one other point, that Joel mentioned in his presentation. You don't have to know everything. Well, not only do you not have to know everything, but you also don't have to agree on everything. I think someone else actually made this point, that as long as you're involved in topics that interest you and you're expressing your own opinion and open to learning about the views of other people, then it's fine to be involved in activities that not everybody agrees with or on the details for. And then briefly, in terms of my own background, I grew up on a farm in Northeast Missouri, went to the University of Missouri for undergrad, and then studied overseas and got a law degree in the United Kingdom, and then a law degree in the United States. And this is something that a lot of people can do if you grew up on a farm like I did, and this is a possibility for other people as well. And from that point, then I was able to get involved in international organizations and in international legal reform of various sorts. One of my students at the law school who graduated, maybe 10 or 11 years ago now, was also in Glasgow at the same time that Claire was there for that, and has also been involved in the Kigali reforms having to do with ozone depletion and certain other greenhouse gases as well. So there are lots of opportunities that are available to people who are interested and work hard. One last thing that I'll point out, and then I should stop, and that is that one of the most recent endeavors I've engaged in is to create something called the Global Restoration Project. And although it's still a work in progress, if you want to look it up online, it's globalrestorationproject.org. And it focuses on the international law, international institutions, international reform angle of the topics that we've been talking about. So just to sum up, I think that by and large, the actual implementation of the policy has to take place at the local level. You've heard a lot about that from the other three speakers today, but I believe there also has to be a lot of coordination at the international level. And there need to be people who are interested in doing that and who feel competent to do that. And I'd urge everybody who's interested to do it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Wow, what a beautiful set of talks. Thank you so much, all of you. Lucky us, we now get to have questions and conversation. We had such a wonderful invitation to not feel sort of trapped by what we think we don't know or what we might not agree with, or the fact that we study something that's not as immediately obviously connected to the solution but it actually is an important part of the process, as are all perspectives. And then Jamie, I appreciated too that you were making a point to say that here locally, the climate action plan is leading by community voices, like you're taking cues from what people are telling you in terms of what needs to be done. So a call to action, everyone. Does anybody want to offer questions yet? Or do you want me to go ahead and start us off a little bit? I'm going to go ahead and start us off a little bit. And feel free to use chat or raise your hand. All right, so I think one thing I'd like to hear, maybe from all of you about if you're willing to talk about it a little bit, is the idea of, and some of you touched on this a little bit, but the idea of finding your own role in this, or applying what it is that you like or are interested in or are good at to this larger movement. Specifically because we heard, Claire mentioned that it's going to require everybody, right? Like not just a chemist, not just an activist, but everybody has a role to play. So what, for each of you, is it that brought you through your own strengths and your own role to this kind of work? John kind of answered this already, but.
Can I kick it off briefly?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. My father, who graduated from high school or 8th grade, probably in about 1925, years and years ago, his class had a class motto as 8th graders, and it was find a path or make one, which seemed like pretty highfalutin for that, for somebody who's maybe 14 years old. But to pick up on Emily's point, it's not just finding your place and finding your own role, but in cases, making your own role. I mean, when I came to the University of Kansas to teach law courses, there was very little in international law. And so I kind of made it up as I went along. And I think that is available as an opportunity in lots of settings. In the Sunrise Movement, for example, maybe Joel can talk about that, but I think there's a lot of cases in which people who come in with an interest and an idea, a set of ideas, can get active, and people will say, oh, well, yeah, you take this, and they're creating their own role.
Actually, kind of bouncing off of that, I think my initial thing that I was very interested in, and something that I'm still very interested in, just in general, is like renewable energy and transportation specifically. And I've been very, very interested in those things, and I've pushed the hub, like the Lawrence hub of Sunrise, to do more of those things. But as I've been involved, I've also sort of realized that I like more of the people organizing and like doing presentations like this. So I feel like it's also something where it's like, if you come in with one idea, just by doing, by going through this process, you are sort of learning more about yourself, and then more about what you want to do more of. So.
I could also respond to that. One of the ways that I first got involved in this well, it's certainly not one of the first, it's just one of the many, but I went through one of the trainings that Douglas County Emergency Management puts on. It's called Cert Training. And I think it's, if I remember right, it stands for Community Emergency Rescue Team. And it's basically a training to take people through how to manage a disaster, a natural disaster that affects the community members. And they didn't mention climate change in the training, but I was sitting there, it was kind of burning on my mind the whole time. Like, we're seeing an influx of extreme weather, and we're going to need more and more of our community members to be trained up on how to triage in an event like that, how to, for those that survive and get through the disaster, whatever kind, can be available to help their neighbors. And I live over in North Lawrence, that's a floodplain. And the year that I moved in, the year before I moved in was a drought. In fact, several years before I moved in where it was a drought, I started to kind of get flood off my mind. And then my first year in my house in North Lawrence, oh, stellar soil, Emily says in the chat. Yeah, that's very true. I also got heavily into gardening once I moved over there. It's one of the main reasons I went. But it's not really meant for people to live in North Lawrence. It's a floodplain. And although we're protected by the levee, my first May there was, the month of May was the wettest May on record for Kansas, on record. So that goes all the way back. If we didn't have a levee, we would have been flooded out multiple times that year, throughout the rest of that year too. And my neighbors were asking questions like, what's our evacuation plan? What do we do? And that was I made a strong connection for me at the local level to adapt to the crisis that we're already seeing. It just makes me feel so much more empowered that people are starting to look at that, but I know that not everybody's making that connection yet. So being able to be a loud voice on this climate action planning and getting more people involved in it is really a wonderful vehicle for me, at least, to be engaged in this way, or the adaptation side of it. And mitigation is extremely important too, but being able to adapt to the crisis and live through it and bounce back, very importantly. That training goes through all of that, all the components of what a community goes through during crisis, during a natural disaster, or even a human caused disaster like terrorism and things like that. They take you through the whole trajectory, and communities that are prepared are the ones that do really well. They're the ones that bounce back. It's not that they don't have crisis. It's just that they are able to recover, be resilient during that. So yeah, I think being a climate ambassador is really a good way to give you kind of a badge to have these conversations with people that maybe you wouldn't otherwise have. Maybe you wouldn't be thinking about talking to your neighbors or your friends or your family or your coworkers, or just hosting a book club to start to dialogue about this, and just know that whatever feedback you get, that's going to get funneled into this plan and will get worked into our adaptation process. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Claire, did you want to respond? You don't have to, but that question. Okay. Well, I thought there was an interesting tie-in with what Jamie just said too, in talking about the levees and what you said earlier with regard to the fact that the science is there to help. I mean, and engineering in this case too, right? Like to have the levees there and to know that they would need to be there and that kind of thing. And could be an example of how it has been effectively implemented to be able to, preserve North Lawrence for as long as it has, but of course, with more action needed. I also was just going to comment on earlier, Jamie, you'd shown the book Braiding Sweetgrass. And there's something that Robin Wall Kimmerer, I'm sort of a fangirl of Robin Wall Kimmerer, and I've watched a lot of her talks online. And something that she says, I don't think it's actually in that book, but that she says a lot, is that what it means to be a truly educated person is to understand your gift and know how to give it. And so this idea of what it is that draws you to apply what you know to this kind of work is sort of, I think, the impetus for that question. So thank you. We do have a question in the chat. Chloe, do you want to unmute and ask it?
Yeah, so it's a question for Jamie. And the other day I was going through the climate action plan on Lawrence's webpage, and I was just curious if there was any future anticipations of discussing green infrastructure in Lawrence, or if it's already been discussed through the climate action plan, and if there are any current ideas for green architecture through the climate action plan or not.
Yeah, that will definitely be a component of the one of the strategies in the plan. The city of Lawrence already has a commitment to get to 100% renewable energy by 2035 for not only city buildings, but also the entire community. And they're holding fast to that plan, and green infrastructure is going to be a big, big, big part of that. If you have suggestions or something specific around green infrastructure that you'd like to see built into the plan, highly recommend that you sign up to be an ambassador, host a conversation, get some feedback, some input or even just send me an email about what you think. That would be fine too. Just any way that you would like to get that voice and that input into the plan, please do, because right now we're trying not to get ahead of ourselves and set policy, or I don't have policy recommendations right now. I have all kinds of things I'd like to see happen, but that's not where we're leading. We're leading with that community voice, and that's the stage that we're in right now. Does that answer your question, Chloe?
Yes, but now I'm curious about what kind of ideas that you have. You just mentioned you had some policies in mind, and I'd like to hear a few that you have.
A few policies I have in mind for our climate action plan. I feel like that if I share those, it's going to be getting ahead of myself and kind of planting seeds for what I think should go into it. So I'm kind of hesitant about answering that. I mentioned one, but I will say that one I mentioned earlier, I'll repeat that one, about the cooling centers. As we know, droughts and flooding are a major problem in our area, in the Midwest in general. But even a bigger problem now is the heat waves. We're seeing more and more of that happening. And I do think that in order to address things at the local level and center members of our community who are going to be hit the hardest, I think we're going to need cooling centers. We're going to need places that people can go and get cool, especially when the grid is down. You guys may have remembered in 2021, my first month on the job, I was actually under my house thawing my pipes out. This is the opposite of it, but it was the Arctic freeze that was happening. And I didn't have power for a little while. There was rolling power outages that were happening. And we're going to see things like that. We need to be aware of that. And that's what our community, I think, is going to need, are things like that, cooling centers or centers to get warm in during an Arctic freeze when the grid is out. So that's just one of many, many ideas I have. But like I said, I don't really want to plant too many of them out there, because I'd really like to hear first and foremost what people are seeing already, what they're most concerned about with climate change. And then we can start to build the policies around that.
Yeah, Nancy, go ahead.
So this is also for Jamie. So I know there's a composting thing that's going on with Just Foods. And is there talk about trying to expand that to the entire Lawrence community so that we can have centralized composting instead of just individuals who choose to do so?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that question. So what Nancy's referring to is that one of the two food waste reduction programs that I'm managing, and that one in particular is for the city of Lawrence. It's a very slow going and a very small test pilot. I need to emphasize that because there's no talk right now of expanding it, much to my dismay. I'd love to see it get expanded, and I'm definitely working very hard at possibly making that a future goal of the cities. But right now, just to give a little bit of background on it, it's a USDA funded pilot to just test out what it's like to start introducing food waste, fruits and veggies, into our existing yard waste compost facility. So those of you who have been down there on 11th Street and picked up compost, up until now, it's only been yard waste that's been composted. And now we have a bin set up at Just Food where they can put in food that's been spoiled. They get a lot of bananas and avocados and all kinds of stuff that's already spoiled by the time it arrives at the warehouse. And so we're actually having the city pick that up, delivered over there, and we have one windrow where we're testing that out to see how it affects their operations there, to see what kind of they're collecting a lot of data. They're really big on, they need to know what the temperature implications are, what the smell is like, what transporting the produce over there has been, the food waste has been like. There's a lot of little things that make it not so easy to just implement right away. It's something I found out a lot when I joined government, is that why things don't move so quickly. Sometimes it can be really disheartening, but there are a lot of things at play. We're trying to work on, for example, right now, there are commercial companies that will do curbside pickup. That's the big thing with the city of Lawrence. They don't have the infrastructure to pick up the food waste from the individual households. So we're looking at ways to offset that. Could that be a commercial company that perhaps goes and picks it up and delivers it to either our yard waste facility, or to one company has a compost facility in Eudora, so it's not very far away. Like the one Missouri Organic is several miles away. Eudora is a lot closer, so we're trying to find ways to make that happen. Lawrence doesn't currently have curbside pickup regulations in place, so a commercial company couldn't even come here and start that right now. So that's something that we're trying to work on. There's also a possibility you might see this happen at the Lawrence Farmers Market this year, where you can subscribe to a company and bring your food waste to the farmers market and actually swap it out and get a clean bucket for a subscription fee. And that's a really, they're trying to make that very accessible. It's not through the city of Lawrence, it's not through the county, but it's us paving the way to make that happen, making those kinds of connections. That's because of this position that I'm in. But yeah, I wish that I could say that we were already, and it was that plans were in the works to have the city expand the compost pilot, but for now it's just kind of keeping it going as it is and continuing to collect more data.
So what will it take to make it go citywide? I know other cities do it. Seattle does it. They do an amazing job. I mean, we could just learn from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and do you mean to have it be at the municipal level rather than through a commercial company?
Exactly.
Yeah. What would it take?
Or contracted through a company through the municipal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say probably the best thing to do is, this is such a good question, and I'm glad you're asking it. Probably the first thing that comes to mind to me is to speak to commissioners about it. Joel had mentioned, share public comments, get in front of the decision makers. Our city commission and county commissioners do make decisions all the time about how we're going to manage the city and how we're going to manage this county. Going to those going to those city commission meetings and keeping it on their radar so they're thinking about it. I'm also thinking about some ways that maybe you could get those comments in front of the solid waste team who is in charge of that. I work with them very closely on the pilot. I think that perhaps you could send me, if you could send me an email, I'll put my email in the chat. Let's talk a little bit more about that, because the first thing that comes to mind, of course, is the commissioners, getting it in front of them that you want to see this happen. It is written into our food system plan that we want to, as a community, reduce our food waste culture. We want to have a culture of food waste reduction through compost and food recovery and prevention. So it is, you could always point to the food system plan that this is already part of our goal. Yeah, I think overcoming the hurdles of how to do the pickup is really the biggest thing, and then how to deal with the smell. The odor that comes from food waste can be pretty strong. I've been to the one in Missouri, and they have it way on the outskirts of town because it's so smelly. It was really bad, actually. They compost meat there. And I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to compost meat and at the municipal level because it's rank. So it's addressing things like that. I hope this is kind of helping. I don't mean to take you off on a tangent, but it's, there's a lot of little things that have to happen before a city can take it on. I do think it would be good for us to look a lot more closely at cities that are doing it and see how they got to that level. What was the one that you recommended? That
Seattle.
Oh, Seattle. Oh yeah, Seattle's got a great program.
Yeah. My daughter lives in Seattle, and I'm on the Sustainability Advisory Board, but Kathy Richardson has not been. She has not thought that's a good idea.
Well, that might be a way to invoke another group like the Food Policy Council or something like that, because I know that they also make recommendations to city commissioners, but yeah,
Emily, that's a really good suggestion. I didn't even put that on my slide, but the Food Policy Council they're an advisory group, and anyone on here can join a meeting at any time or one of our working groups. And I actually help co-lead the Forward working group, which works on food waste reduction. And we are looking at policies and ways to strengthen the culture of food waste reduction here. So Nancy, that might be a really good opportunity to come and just start to have these conversations so you can understand a little bit more of what the hurdles are and then how we can collectively take action.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think I might try for one more question. I know we're coming up in the hour and we've lost a lot of people, but we are recording, so they'll hopefully be able to see this when they get back to it. So Claire, I'm gonna actually aim this at you, but I think a couple people might be able to respond to as well. I'm curious, so a lot of you in your presentations talked about ways that we're communicating, whether that's through climate conversations and organizing and reading books together and attending, in the case, Claire, you mentioned the COP26, sort of being structured like an academic conference. One thing that I'm always interested in at academic conferences is how to keep a conversation going. So I'm curious from your experience there, if there was anything interesting structurally to like both give people an opportunity to actually talk and maybe think about developing some work together, and then also like what the follow-up is like with that, or just if you observe, not to put you on the spot as far as whether you are doing it or not.
Yeah, I think so the whole goal of having students go from universities was just to be able to act as like student delegates to their school and their communities and be able to like pass on those conversations. So the whole point of me going wasn't like just a vacation, but it was like so that I would come and bring that back and be able to talk about it. And so following up, the group through ACS has a really cool kind of thing. Like if you go, you have to present at the ACS meeting in San Diego, which was actually like the week after spring break, so just a little bit ago. So you present there to people that come and watch, and that was a hybrid meeting also, so maybe people could come, but it's not as accessible because people had to like pay to go and register for the meeting. And so that is like a small part of what we are doing, but I'm seeing that a lot of people, especially like the undergrads that I went with, are giving talks at their universities, to other schools, just like hosting events, starting sustainability committees like at their school, and just stuff like that. So yeah, the whole follow-up on it was basically just to bring it back and act as a student delegate. And so I'm starting, like I said, I'm kind of starting the climate involvement with myself. I feel like there's a ton more I could be doing, and I'm really, really excited to be able to like after that, sparked a ton of interest in me. So I'm really excited to be able to like be pursuing things on like the local and moving my way up level. But yeah, I definitely just being able to take the experiences that you have the really cool opportunity to be a part of and then just sharing with other people. Because I think the biggest way to spread information is, because like not everybody can come to these meetings and stuff. The biggest way to spread information is just through your friends and through the people that are closest to you. And if you care about something so deeply, then like they're going to see that and want to care about it as well. So the conversations that you're having with one another are very important, not just putting on a face for like university talks and then being a different person when you're with your friends or your family, but like if you care about this all the time, then the people closest to you should know it as well. So yeah, that's my answer.
That's a really good point, and links back to what John said earlier too about not needing to necessarily agree with everything everyone's saying all the time to find it valuable to have a conversation with them. I want to do one link because I think that this is going to be relevant for, in fact, I think I saw Catherine Hayhoe in one of your slides, Claire. So she's actually giving a talk for KU at the end of this month virtually. There's a link in the chat. And maybe this is a good opportunity to have some little conversation groups, some watching groups or something like that. I think there's a group of students organizing to watch at Marvin Hall in the forum. So that might be an opportunity for some conversations to be happening on the ground too. But we are right at 1 o'clock and I really want to thank you all. This was such an engaging conversation. Thank you all for your words and your listening and all your ideas.
Thank you so much, Emily. This was great. It was nice to see all of you.
Yeah, of course. Take care.
Any questions that anybody else has that weren't addressed? My email is just very easy to find. Just look me up on Outlook. So.
Okay, sounds good.